I didn't believe in ghosts until this happened to me. This is the story of my 7-minute encounter with a real ghost. It was around 4 a.m. and I was driving home from a friend's house. I was exhausted and the drive home was about 20 minutes. So I decided to stop for some coffee. I stopped at a gas station that was close to my home. It was off the beaten path, and there were no other cars around. It was an old rundown gas station that had seen better days. As I walked into the store, I noticed how dark it was inside. The lights were flickering and shadows were dancing across the floor. The only sound I could hear was the wind howling outside. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. And as I turned to look, I saw a woman standing in the doorway. She looked like she was from another time, wearing a long flowing dress and a bonnet. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide and scared. She took a step back, and then she disappeared. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what I had just seen. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the light? Or something else entirely? I tried to shake off the image of the woman and went to get my coffee. As I waited for my coffee to brew, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I started to notice strange things happening around me. The temperature suddenly dropped, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. My coffee was ready, and I took it with trembling hands back to my car. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the woman from the gas station in my rearview mirror. But of course there was no one there. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination.
Gosh.
But deep down, I knew I had seen something that night. The next morning, I told my friends about my experience. They listened patiently, their faces etched with concern. Then they burst out laughing. "A ghost in a gas station," one of them said between giggles. "You've been watching too many horror movies," another one said. I knew they didn't believe me, but I didn't blame them. I couldn't convince myself that what I had seen was real. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the ghost faded to the back of my mind. I went about my life, trying to put the incident at the gas station behind me, but I never forgot about it. The thought of a ghost still sent shivers down my spine. Then one day I was at home, and I decided to do some research about the history of the area. I typed in the name of the town along with the word history and hit enter. As I read through the articles, I came across a name that made me stop. Elizabeth Borden, I read. She was born in the early 1800s and died in a tragic accident in 1863. She was visiting a friend in the next town over when the carriage she was riding in was struck by a tree that fell across the road. Elizabeth was killed instantly. The driver and her friends survived, but they suffered serious injuries. I read on, fascinated by Elizabeth's story. It seemed like she had been an integral part of the community. Everyone knew her and loved her. When she died, the whole town mourned. As I read through the article, I felt a sense of unease creep over me. Something about Elizabeth's story seemed familiar. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had heard this story before. Determined to find out more, I went to the local library and spoke to a librarian. She helped me locate the original newspaper clippings about the accident. As I read through the articles, my heart sank. The details were even more gruesome than the ones I had read online. Elizabeth's body had been mangled beyond recognition. The driver had been left paralyzed from the waist down, and her friend had lost an arm and a leg. But it was the location of the accident that really caught my attention. The carriage had been traveling along the same road that I had taken to the gas station, and the accident had happened near the old, abandoned gas station. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what I had found. The ghost I had seen in the gas station was Elizabeth. She had been killed in a tragic accident, and her spirit was now trapped in the old gas station. I couldn't believe what I had discovered, but I knew in my heart that it was true. I could feel Elizabeth's presence every time I passed by the old gas station. Sometimes I would see her standing by the road, her white dress flowing in the wind. Other times I would hear her voice, a faint whisper that carried on the breeze. One day, I decided to visit the site of the accident. I wanted to pay my respects to Elizabeth and see if I could feel her presence there. As I stood by the road, I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. Here was where she had died, here where her spirit had become trapped. I could almost feel her pain, the fear and anguish she must have felt as the carriage was struck. Suddenly I heard a noise in the bushes nearby. I jumped and turned to see what it was, my heart pounding in my chest. A small animal darted out and disappeared into the trees. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Just a deer, I told myself. But as I continued to stand there, I could feel Elizabeth's presence growing stronger. I closed my eyes and reached out my hand as if to touch her. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry you died here. I'm sorry you're stuck here." As I spoke, I could feel a sense of calm washing over me. I knew in my heart that I had done the right thing, had finally found peace. And then it happened. As if in response to my words, the sun broke through the clouds and shone brightly on the trees around me. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, and the birds began to sing. It was as if nature itself was rejoicing. I stood there for a long time, soaking in the beauty of the day. Feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin and the breeze on my face, I could feel Elizabeth's presence beside me, her spirit at peace. When I finally turned to leave, I knew I would never forget this day. I had come to say goodbye to Elizabeth, and I had done that. I had said my goodbyes. As I drove past the old gas station, I glanced over at the road where Elizabeth had died. I could have sworn I saw her standing there, waving at me. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or if it was really her, but I waved back anyway. I felt a sense of closure knowing that I had said goodbye to her and that her spirit was finally at rest. From that day forward, I never saw Elizabeth again. But I never forgot her. Whenever I pass by the old gas station, I think of her and the tragic accident that took her life. I also feel grateful that I had the opportunity to say goodbye to her and that her spirit found peace after all these years. It's been many years since my encounter with Elizabeth, but it still feels like it was yesterday. I still remember the fear and wonder I felt when I first saw her in the gas station. And I still think about the closure I found when I visited the site of her accident. I know that some people will never believe my story, but that's okay. I don't tell it to scare people or to make them believe in ghosts. I tell it because it's my story, and it's a part of me. It's a part of who I am. And if my story can bring comfort to others who have lost someone they love, then I'm happy to share it. Maybe we do, and have to be afraid of the dark or the things that go bump in the night. Maybe we should embrace the unknown, because it's in the unknown that we find the most wonder.